Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for joining the Intrascope Spotlight on Internal Communication series. I've been talking to a lot of thought leaders on various aspects of internal communications. So I'm very delighted to have you on my show, and I'm really glad that you're going to be speaking about the impact of trust in communications. So before we get started, if you could
delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. And before we get started, if you could quickly introduce yourself for our viewers.
Yes, of course. My name is Paul Matthews. I'm a communicator, mentor, and coach. And for about 20 years, I've helped leaders and teams build impact and trust. I run my own consultancy now, which is all about powerful communications, helping organizations and leaders build impact and trust.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know you're from the UK, and rather you're Welsh, and you've been staying in Australia. So you obviously have a bit of the cultural understanding as well regarding trust in comms.
Absolutely, yeah. I was born and brought up in Wales and lived for first 30-something years of my life in the UK, but I've been living in Australia for about 15 years now. So yeah, a different perspective, an Antipodean cultural perspective as well as European.
Fantastic. So let me get started by asking the first question. So what, according to you, is the relevance of trust in communications, especially internal communications? Because I think internally we need to be sure about trust being built.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, trust is what I call the essence of leading now. It's the most important part of being a leader, is to be trusted. And the reason for that is because the workforce has changed. So previously, we might have been able to tell our employees what to do. Right. And rely on hierarchy as part of the communication infrastructure. But these days, the workforce is more educated, it's more sophisticated, and it's more upwardly mobile and empowered than ever. So leaders can't necessarily tell employees what to do. If they do, and if leaders don't listen and they focus on hierarchy rather than empathy and connection, employees are probably going to run a mile. So I believe that trust is at the heart of effective leadership and effective communication for organizations now.
Fantastic. And so how do you think trust can be built through communication? So what is the ways that it works?
Yeah, so look, I feel like historically we relied, as I said earlier, on telling people what to do, and that shuts the brain down. People have a fight or flight response when they're told what to do, and it's proven through neuroscience in the brain that reaction chemicals shut us down and we go into compliance mode. Not a good place to be. Whilst when leaders have conversations, they create a bonding mechanism which engenders trust, but it also, neuroscience has proven that creates a bonding response in the employee. And so they come up with ideas, they have a sense of belonging, and they create connection. So it's really about having a more empowering relationship with employees. That's how you can build trust, and that's why it's important, because it leads to greater innovation, connection, engagement, and ultimately higher performance.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what do you think internal communicators should do more to kind of build trust among stakeholders, because they work with leaders, with managers, with employees? So what are the ways in which they can do that?
Absolutely. Look, I recently wrote a book called Switch, and that was targeting leaders to stop telling and start trusting. Right. And I believe that the internal communications team has a really big role to play in engendering the big conversation within an organization. But a big part of that for me is switching our role from what used to be the traditional channels and content focus, and switching our focus now. Our mandate, I believe, is firstly helping leaders understand that the workforce has evolved. They're more educated, they want to be involved, and they want to have a conversation. So the first bit for internal communicators is helping leaders understand the workforce, because if they don't switch, the organization is going to get left behind. So that's the first part. The second part is engendering much better capability in leaders to communicate. So if we just rely on channels, they're generally one way. They don't build trust, and they don't drive performance. It's the day-to-day conversations between leaders and employees that actually drive behavior, culture, and change. So investing our time in building better leadership capability, working directly with leaders as coaches and advisors, is really where I believe we should be investing. Because I say, you know, your ability to, or your leadership communication capability is like a roof, and it can lock down your business results or lift them up. And so I also say that our internal communications capability is the same. If we're focusing on the old school channels and content, and we're not, you know, lifting leaders, we're going to lock down our results as well.
Got it. Brilliant. And, you know, I've been following the Edelman Trust Barometer Index for many years, and I'm sure you've heard of it. And, you know, it keeps saying that trust in institutions keeps eroding. So what are your reflections on that, and what does it really mean for organizations and communicators?
Yeah, so look, time and time again, the Edelman Trust Barometer shows us which organizations are eroding, and never before has there been such low trust in, you know, banks, particularly in Australia. You know, we've had Royal Commission investigations into the banks and into the church. Two of the most trusted foundations of community previously are now actually at very low trust. But what last year's Edelman Barometer did show is that the community has a higher trust and an expectation of organizations to solve societal issues like climate change. So that, to me, shows us that internal communications teams have a responsibility to help their leaders, you know, get more involved in community issues like climate change, like equality, and that's been proven. Like chief executives, for example, Alan Joyce at Qantas, very much aligned by having single-sex marriage in Australia, getting very involved in those kind of issues. So as internal communicators, I think we've got a real role in helping leaders not just understand the workforce, but, you know, building trust in the community as well is a key part of our role.
Great, absolutely. And, you know, trust is seen like a very soft issue. So, you know, how do you measure it, and how do you know whether you are moving the needle in terms of building trust through communications? Absolutely.
And look, there's no getting away from the fact that it's a nebulous concept. But I believe when you feel that trust has grown, you know it has. You know deep down when somebody trusts you, or you trust them, or trust has improved. But I'd be saying that you would be measuring trust around the impact that your leader is having. So are they increasing performance? Is the cultural scores in your organization gone up? Is the you know, the degree to which employees are taking action on request from managers are all indications that, you know, employees have a sense of belonging in the organization, they trust their leader, and they trust their organization. And we all know that saying of people leave bad bosses, not bad organizations. Well, you know, when in low trust organizations, there's a high degree of turnover of staff, there's high costs, there's a lot of waste, complaints, you know, customers drop away. But what I see in high trust organizations are increase in customer scores, employee and customer satisfaction grows up, productivity and performance generally is higher. So high trust organizations generally have those traits.
Great. And as we wrap up, you know, I wanted to ask you, you know, what are your advice and what tips do you have for communicators as they think about integrating or having an impact through trust?
Yeah, so my absolute mantra for anybody working in internal communications or any other part of communications is learn the organization. We are advisors, we are coaches. We can't give great advice and build trust and become a trusted advisor if we don't understand the business, if we don't know who our employees are. And, you know, ultimately, when I coach leaders, I help them understand that, you know, employees know the organization best.
Right.
They know they're closer to the customers, they're closer to our problems. So building great relationships with employees and leaders is probably the biggie when it comes to being a trusted communicator.
Brilliant, brilliant, Paul. Thank you so much. These are like brilliant insights, and really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. And I'm sure this will be very, very valuable for our viewers.
That's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.